to welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Sean Todd Boone, and welcome to the 2022 University of Phoenix Office of Education Equity inaugural Inclusive Leadership Summit. And we are so excited and honored that you decided to take some time with us and this extraordinary group of individuals to whom I will introduce in a moment. One of the things that has become more customary for me, especially in the virtual world and virtual settings, is to just say to folks, breathe, just breathe. Um, so, since the arrival of COVID 19 over 2 years ago and the ensuing economic fallout, which we've heard so much and we've seen so much about, and I know President Emeritus Cohen shared this morning a new report indicating some of that fallout as well, and the rise of racial injustice and the pursuant unrest, K 12 and higher education really had to re envision and adapt to these tumultuous times. And so I would like to say, as a dean, a teacher, a superintendent, all walked into a room, and it might sort of start and sound a little like a joke, but it's not, right? We've all sort of run into a room, run into the virtual world, and we're looking for this idea, this sense of urgency and creativity to provide information, resources to our students, to their families, and to our communities across the world, across the country. So it gives me a great pleasure to introduce our panelists for today. So please join me in welcoming, as I introduce them, Dr. Joy Taylor, a former classroom teacher, school principal, and district administrator in K-12 education. Dr. Alencia Bowen, currently the Franklin University Dean of the Ross College of Business, Executive Director of the Franklin University Leadership Center, and Co-Executive Director of the Global Center in Healthcare Education. Dr. Shaquana Robinson, who currently serves as a school-based instructional specialist, Title I facilitator, professional development leader, and problem-solving team coordinator in the Mobile County Public School System. Dr. Jane Schumacher, who's lead faculty area chair in the College of Doctoral Studies at University of Phoenix for the education programs. Dr. Schumacher has served as a deputy superintendent and assistant superintendent of curriculum, instruction and assessment, and professional development, has been a school principal and teacher. And Dr. Jim Lane, who is who's actually a current Access Panel Validator in the College of Doctoral Studies at University of Phoenix, has been a school English teacher, language arts supervisor, system principal, and principal. And so the wealth of information just is boundless and limitless. And so great connections to make in this workshop. And as I mentioned, I'm Dr. Sean Todd Boone. I'm the Associate Dean of Research, Access, and Residency in the College of Doctoral Studies at University of Phoenix. So I'm excited to moderate today. And so I want to go over to Dr. So that we can put an end to the suffering of the chainsaws in the back. But Dr. Taylor, I'd love for you to start this discussion for us as we look at the different topics that have arisen with this onset of the pandemic and civil unrest, and what that impact has meant and been in our school systems. Dr. Taylor.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Boone. Happy to be here. And as our PowerPoint is coming up, just excited about being here first time with the summit. The keynote speaker this morning, oh my goodness, phenomenal. Just really inspiring and motivating and thought-provoking. And that's what we want to do today. As Dr. Boone said, my name is Joy Taylor. I currently work as a research fellow with the Center for Workplace Diversity and Inclusion Research with the University of Phoenix. But also, along with that, I have more than 36 years of experience in the K-12 education system and kind of done a little bit of everything. Been a classroom teacher for about 14 years, a wonderful job. Moved from there to curriculum coordinator, where that was my first time kind of seeing behind the scenes. And I think as leaders, we realize things are different when you're behind the scenes, maybe so than folks who may be on the front lines. Also, have had years as a school principal and then as a director for federal programs. And one of my, Dr. Robinson, also, I think I heard in your introduction that you work with Title I programs and all, something that's very near and dear to my heart. So happy to be here. It's always interesting when you're trying a new platform, you get on, you're all set, you have it all mapped out, and then things suddenly change. But you know what? Leaders are flexible, you just run with it. And I think that's something you just have to know. Talking about leading in tumultuous times, that any situation that comes up that might be unexpected, staying calm, keeping your head straight, and just thinking it through normally gets you to where you need to go. So we're ready for the next slide now. So for today, as we've been planning for the summit and had a number of different conversations, and that we're in the education forum and talked about some of the different experiences that I've gone through as a school administrator. Of course, I'll be talking about things from an education standpoint, what it's like being a school level principal, those types of things. But really, we want it to be that it's something that's applicable to different settings, because as you noticed in the introductions, a lot of different skill sets here, a lot of different backgrounds, and so different perspectives. So hopefully you'll find something there that will work for you. But the main thing is, when you think of tumultuous times, here are some descriptors that may come to mind. Emotional. Anytime there's upheaval, things are not going the way we thought they would or expected them to, you're going to have that emotion. Could be violent, as our keynote talked about earlier, about the systemic racism, all the things that have been happening within society. Sometimes we're violent, and then things can be overwhelming. Doesn't have to be violent to be overwhelming. It can just be a lot. If you're going in brand new, you're learning the ropes, you're replacing someone who's been there forever and a day. Now you're coming in and you have really big boots to fill, can also feel overwhelming. Turbulent, just unrest and upheaval. And the upheaval that we've all been through just over the last couple of years is trying to lead our organizations, lead the different groups that we work with, even as we try to help them feel safe and motivated during a global pandemic. And then also keeping ourselves feeling safe and motivated as things are turbulent and uncertain around us. But, as you look at these different descriptors, the common factor is that tumultuous times call for intentional actions and directions. If your things all around you, your setting are topsy-turvy, that's not the time for the leader to be that way. That's the time to become reflective and really think about, okay, how are we going to systematically work our way through this? It's not a time for panic, and it's not a time for impulsive responses. Instead, you want to be intentional, well planned, and have actions in directions. So this type of leadership does a number of things. It causes a sense of calmness. It'll help the people around you feel calmer, and it builds a sense of confidence that I'm working with someone who's not just impulsively running and putting out fires, but who's thinking long term, how we're going to work through these situations that we find ourselves in. And then it just brings a sense of order to the workplace. Some of the places I've worked, where each day was kind of a hard day, but it was rewarding because we had a plan and we were working our plan instead of being reactionary. Next slide. And so, when you think about tumultuous times, that's a time when it's time to listen more than you talk. And just to give you an example, um, of a tumultuous situation that I experienced in education. Years ago, selected as a brand new principal, had been an assistant principal, but it was my first principalship. Was assigned to a school that some people would consider was in the wrong part of town. It had high staff turnover, extremely high principal turnover, poor reputation in the community, where there was literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fights that were happening within this building, and it was on top of all that labeled by the state as failing. And so you think about it's tumultuous because people are coming into this building, children, parents, teachers, whoever, and they've been hearing about all the things that are happening there, and it feels like there's upheaval and unrest. And so assuming leadership in a workplace that's experiencing upheaval, especially as a newcomer, as a brand new principal. Um, you heard the expression, you're building the airplane as you go to some degree because you're coming into a new situation. You don't know the people, they don't know you. And so you're trying to build that rapport and relationship there. And it can be intimidating. But one of the things that we want you to keep in mind, if you don't take anything else away from all of this talk about leadership, um, one thing that I had to internalize was I'm not here, even though they might call you a turnaround principal, you're not here to clean house, um, to show your supervisor that they made the right choice. That is absolutely the wrong way to start out in a new setting when it's already tumultuous. And then you have someone come in, the next reincarnation of Joe Clark. I'm going to come in here, whip this place into order, and everyone's going to see how wonderful I am. That doesn't fly in the workplace. The things that I focused on, and there's many, but I think all of us have within us a philosophy or a belief system as far as how we conduct ourselves on a day-to-day basis. And so the three that I wanted to talk about was building trust, listening to feedback, and developing short and long-term goals. Um, these are my three. You may have something completely different. I did feel good this morning as I was listening to the keynote speaker and even the career presentation before, where some of these same ideas did come up because all of them really tie back to relationships. And that was a note that I wrote down. Relationships drive everything. So when you're trying to build trust, you're making a personal connection. I know more about Miss Smith than that she teaches fifth grade. Need to know a little bit more about her as far as a person. What does she like to do out of school? Does she have children? Is she herself going to school? So making that personal connection, which shows people I care about you and I see you as more than just an employee. You're someone that's important to me. Also, being honest. You're coming into a school that's on the news, um, failing school, failing, they've heard about it. They know where you're in a tough spot. So there's no point in coming in and trying to hide things. And I've just found that if you come clean with people and you tell them this is where we are and this is what we're dealing with, they jump on board and they're more likely to want to work with you. Um, One of the ways that I was able to connect in this Title I school that I was assigned to was I myself was a Title I student, child that grew up in a home where dad was illiterate, mom had a third grade education. And the thing that always pushed me forward, and and my mom is get doing a good job in school. That school's important. Get a great education. That's going to help you so that you can make a better life for yourself. And so coming in and being just authentic of we're in this together, you know, that we're here, but we don't have to stay here and we can move forward together and working as a community and listening, hearing their concerns. And one thing that new leaders especially can fall into the trap of feeling, everyone sways them. This person has that opinion, that person has another opinion, but knowing what you believe and what's important to you just really matters. And so hearing their concerns, but being clear on some things we just have to do because that's the way it is. It's mandatory. It's required by the state. These are things we have to do. But the good news is we're going to work together as a community to figure out what's the best way to get this done. Also, everyone has a role to play. We always used to say we sink or swim together, that if we're in these turbulent times, things are upsetting. We all have a lot that's coming at us, but There's just something that's very comforting about being in a tough job with people that you know, I've got your back, you have mine, and we will work through this together. Um, Another big thing was setting goals. How do you know you've accomplished or arrived where you're going if you don't know where you're going? So putting that goal out there as far as starting with the end in mind and then breaking it down into manageable pieces. Sometimes things seem tumultuous and overwhelming because we're looking at the big picture as far as, oh, we have to get here, but you really get to things step by step. You know, here's what we're going to do this week. And we continue to move forward. And, you know, elementary person, you posted everywhere around the school so that with graphs, charts, pictures, so that even anytime that someone comes into our school, the first thing they're running into is this is what we're working on. This is where we are. This is where we're trying to get to. And it gives that sense to parents of, oh, something's changing here. Something's happening within the network of our school that will help to make things better. And so, next slide, please. You can go back one. There you go. When I was working on this, we initially talked about what was it like going in to a school that was labeled failing compared to going in as someone that opened a brand new school, which that's a wonderful assignment. You know, for any principal, it's a unique opportunity. Um, and I really thought about it, you know, even in the best of times, it calls for a calm, clear headed, intentional, and inclusive response because good schools don't just happen by accident. They're that way because someone has put in the work and it's orderly. You can go. I've seen it. You know, you send someone into a school that's high performing. Oh, they feel like the work's already done. I can go in and just relax. And within a year, you start to see that decline. 2, 3 years down the road, it's in trouble. And so, always having a calm, clear-headed, and intentional plan is really important. And just listening to feedback from the stakeholders is so important as far as what do they have to say? What are their ideas for how we can make this work? It helps to build that sense of engagement and the belonging. And then one of the things that happened, you know, 4 years after opening the new school, had the opportunity to go where I always had my heart set on. I was a principal for, I don't know, 11 or 12 years. And I always said, I'll never leave unless I get to go work with Title One. And so I had the opportunity to do that because I was a Title One kid, and that's what was in your heart. And so thinking about, okay, I want to go downtown and do this. Um, what I discovered though is even our next slide, please. Even in going to a situation where um, I'm not directly working with parents or students every day, those same core beliefs still serve me well as far as, all right, I've got the homeless department, migrant department, parenting. I've got all these different pieces that are together. But the thing is they don't know me. I don't know them. We have to start with trust and building relationships and valuing people for what they have to bring to the table. Um, as you look at this list, talking about intentional leaders and actively listening to people as far as what they have to share and striving to include everyone in a meaningful way. And that means not just busy work or grunt work, but involving people in a way that they feel that they're having some input in decision making. um, Promotes a sense of belonging. When you know, it's easy to say we're all in this together, but it doesn't ring true if the leader's making all the decisions and just mandating what everyone does. And so it's a two-way relationship. Um, Serving as mentor for those. If you're a smart leader, you're always building up a good bench as far as I've got people that can do things. If I'm not there, you've got others that can step in and help pave the way. And lots of, you know, celebrating successes, but also honestly and openly discussing where are the areas where we need to keep working, because everything's not all roses. There's a lot to do, and we need to address that. And then allowing others to shine, I think, is an area that can be difficult, especially when you're going through something, a hard time, you're trying to figure out. Um, but smart leaders know you can't do it on your own. You cannot do it all by yourself, because you just need that support system. And like I said, even as a leader, you need someone there that's going to be there to motivate you. And one place is where you get motivation is seeing others develop and growing. Um, in their daily work, and being proactive. You have to be thinking ahead, but I think a lot of that too is modeling it, that you're thinking ahead and looking ahead. And the funny thing is that what happens is your employees start to think ahead. They'll start thinking, oh, what if we tried this, or what if we tried that? And learn, and you begin to see that I'm not the one that has to have all the answers. All these brilliant minds in here, all these people who care about our company, they have a lot to offer if I give them a platform to do that. So I wanted to stop there and see if we had any comments from anyone else on our panel.
And while folks are coming off, Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor, just a few reactions. Jaleesa, and I hope I'm pronounced it right, Dallas talked
Mm-hmm.
about what you were sharing, a clear trajectory of relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
Sonia Richardson was responding to that positive nature of change for all involved while still working on the relationships. And something you just said at the end as you were sort of transitioning to the broader group was listening to the others. I once worked with a superintendent who would say, the experts are in the room. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so listening to get and to feed and to collaborate and all of those pieces. So thank you for that. So I know you wanted to open it up to our other panel folks to sort of give some reactions and responses to what you just said. So we'll open that up.
Wanted to start with Jim. I know that you have a administrative background as well. As far as what were some of your guiding principles, as far as these are the things within our building, as this is how we do build business. This is our culture that we have.
Yeah, I am so inspired by your story. You know, it's a complex response. It's not just one answer, but I mean, obviously, maybe middle class white guy, okay. But I went into a school. My first principalship was a Title I school, which was not a failing school, but that had gotten C's and D's in the Florida um, system, and it was called a ghetto school.
Mm.
And I didn't know what I was doing. But what I learned, but we worked hard. We developed a community, and I kind of cut to the chase. We several years later we got an A, and school was remodeled, and a lot of good things happened. But I think community. So to focus on what you're saying, I think that it is emotional.
Mm-hmm.
It is overwhelming. There's no doubt, that one goes home exhausted. I'd say if you're not doing your job. Certainly, upheaval is a key. Um, but I think building a community and building a sense of pride, and I don't think you do it overnight. I think, as you said, you listen. And I love what you said. You listen more than you talk, and it's hard for me sometimes. That was a lesson that I had to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Listen more than you talk, and listen to people who don't agree with you,
Mm-hmm.
and identify leaders. I mean, you can be pretty easy. I think you can identify people who are leaders in the school and people who have, Juana would be a great example, who have those key leadership skills. Listen to them, let them know that they can tell you whatever, because you got to have
Mm-hmm.
people who give you feedback. You got to have
Right.
people who tell you what's going on out there. You don't want yes people who just tell you, oh yeah, Jim, that's all great. No, 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 no. Um, so I think just to start, trust. You talk about trust. You talk about community. You talk about feedback, a sense of pride and a sense of belonging. And how do you go from a point where people say, well, that's a ghetto school, to say this is a place that I'm proud of? Uh, baby steps, baby steps.
Mhm.
Goals, as you said, trust, community, and it can come around. These are turbulent times, uh, which I'm sure we'll continue to talk about. These are hard times for schools, and I think these conversations are more important than ever. And I just applaud the university for taking this step,
Mhm.
to do this kind of a thing, because it's got to start. It's got to start somewhere, and
Yeah.
Juan and Lindsay and I were involved in a project where we talked with African American female principals, and that's what they said. You got to start. So that's enough for me. Say I talk more than I listen. So shut up.
I love this comment in the chat that says that it's important to look beyond ourselves in the pursuit of our passion. The goal is always bigger than us. And I think that helps to take one of the terms that Tim used this morning was, I think it was radically humble.
Yeah.
Oh my
Radical
goodness.
humility.
You can get so much more done if we check our egos at the door and just dig in and get ready to work. And so, when you're talking about schools labeled ghetto schools and things, the relationships is what changes that whole mindset within a school as far as, okay, kids, we're not going to have trash laying around campus because you're here and you deserve to be in a nice looking place. And then, let's get some murals on the wall, little things that children stand up and take notice of. Oh, my school's not a dump. It's not trash. This is a place where we learn and we have self-respect. And it is little things, little by little. And as that it's like a fire that catches place. One person starts it, someone else grabs onto it, and it just continues to grow. And um, honestly, in my school, we started with one parent. She took over. She was going to be head of the PTA, and she was like a little firecracker. She
Yeah.
got people motivated and inspired, and you will be amazed at how just changing the mindset of the people in that building magically, guess what? Oh, our children are performing better because they feel better, they feel like they feel like they're in a safe environment. And so says how can we approach change in a way that fosters relationships even when change often sparks fear? And it did spark some fear because some people decided after a year, oh, I'm out of here. This is not the place for me because too much work, too much focus, too much, we're not playing around here anymore and it's time to work. And so I agree. I think today's discussions have been wonderful. Anyone else that wanted to make some comments?
So, to the question that was just raised about change
Hmm.
and when fear is sparked, I'll share that um, right prior to the pandemic, the university where I serve, we also had an internal disruption.
Hmm.
It's when a reorganization doesn't go as well as you had planned for it to go. And so we had individuals that were fearful, that were angry, that were sad, emotions were everywhere. And then the pandemic hit. And so how do you send people home to work independently or in an isolated environment with all of those emotions and realities running amok? And I had been a dean before and served in a capacity as a dean in different areas of the university, but I was newly assigned to the college that I am at now. And so that was 2 months before the pandemic. And the first thing I said was I wanted to actively listen. That meant that I wasn't forming my own opinions, and the key was I started out at the beginning at the lowest rung of the level, meaning came in as the bottom of the totem pole, the faculty, and now I was their dean, and, so I actively listened and, didn't form any judgment, just let people speak, and prior to leaving the campus to go home for the pandemic, I remember we were in a culture building session, and one of the one of my colleagues asked the question, Lindsay, why aren't you saying anything? And I asked them, could I be invited into their group? I did not presume because I was the leader, I was already a part of the group.
Mhm.
And they said to me months later that that statement of asking, can I be invited? Can I collaborate? Can I join? Can I share? That let them know that I respected them enough to ask, can I be included? Don't just barge in and figure things out. So when we talk about change, and yes, change is something I feel very comfortable with. It was my job in healthcare for many years. I was a change agent, and that I was a Six Sigma. I'm still am a Six Sigma practitioner. And so when it comes to change, it's not necessarily getting rid of the fears, but acknowledging that they're present so that individual can then work on that fear. And so
Mhm.
many times as leaders, whether it's higher education or K through 12, people are come to work with things that we have no clue that they're dealing with. And
Mhm.
we are not necessarily the individuals that they want to unpack those problems or emotions with. We need to respect that, but we also need to acknowledge that it exists. And so when we talked about becoming intentional leaders, I loved what you said about actively listening. And then also, I don't necessarily serve as a mentor, I serve as a coach. I can't say that I've walked in everyone's shoes and then therefore can tell them how to put them on a little bit better. That's what I think about mentorship, but I do try to inspire you to live that authentic self that you have and that you're doing things that promote the best you. So I tend to coach a little bit more, but then I always look at how can I celebrate a success or successes. I enjoy being able to share with other people what others have done in my team, and so I don't typically show up as the boss. I typically show up as a colleague,
Mhm.
and so I think that that also helps with my intentionality. And so, like recently, I told some department chairs that report to me that I was tired. It was time for them to take over leading certain meetings, and they were excited and scared at the same time. And I said, I didn't say I wasn't going to attend. I didn't say that I'm not going to support you. I'm just saying I don't have to be the face in every
Mhm.
meeting. And I want you to
Mhm.
be the face. I want you to step in and lead. And I think that that helps me because that's delegating. But as an intentional leader, look at the strengths internally and then coach individuals to build upon those strengths so that they can shine. And when they shine, you will shine. That's
Right.
Thank you for the
Right.
opportunity to share.
Their success is yours, is everyone's success.
Yeah. Joy,
Shaquan. Mhm.
I've been asked to share from the perspective of a school board member. Perfect timing because last Monday, our executive director resigned, which has thrown the entire community into chaos. And so the governing board has decided that what we need to emphasize um, is really patience, stability, calm leadership. We're not changing any programs. I think one of the downfalls from the board's perspective, I happen to live in an indigenous culture. I live in the Hawaiian Islands. Um, this particular executive director who just resigned came to the islands about 2 years ago, but had no understanding of the community. The way we do things here is incredibly different. There are values in the Hawaiian Islands that really are not emphasized as much on the continent. And this particular director came in trying to use her leadership skills that she's learned on the continent in the Hawaiian Islands, and they didn't work. You know, here we value aloha or love and inclusion of everybody and everything, humility, which is called ha'aha'a. So knowing the values of your community and the culture of your community is critically important.
Mhm.
I remember as a principal, my staff wanted to offer a session on how to read aloud to your children. And I'll never forget this mother sat in my office and said, "Don't be telling me how to read aloud to my children. Tell me how to keep my kids clothed and fed on the small percentage that I get in my checks every month." So we created a family center where families could come in if they needed clean clothing. We had a washer and dryer. If they needed clothing, we had a guideline that you could take as much as you needed, but you had to give back something. So we were fostering a sense of community. We housed our WIC distribution program in the family center. But you have to understand the values and the culture of the community in which you're working.
Mhm.
And we're working now as a board to sort of reestablish that, make sure whoever it is that we bring in understands that we do things differently here.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. I was just sitting here smiling, thinking about when I first got started, coming into a school where my school was 99.9% free and reduced lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And coming in, most of the children were African American children or Haitian, mixture of a lot of Esau kids. But the thing that was an issue with some of my Black female parents was, okay, let's see where she's coming from with her college degrees,
Yeah.
and but when they realized, I grew up in a house without running water. We didn't have plumbing in my house. My dad could not read. My mom only went to third grade. All of a sudden, they're like, okay, wait a minute. What's this? And that's why that thing of just being honest of, I'm not making this. I'm here because I know what schooling did for me. That's why I want to be here. I applied to be at this school. I feel fortunate to be here, and I need your help to work. And we end up having just the best relationship because it's like, no, she's not the snooty college girl. She's here for someone that actually has been there and is a living example of you can make it and you can be successful. And so, yeah, but you really have to know your group and who you're working with. Shaquana, we want to go back to you. I know we're
Great
trying to wrap up.
segue into
Uh-huh.
my comments. And again, Joy, I think we had this conversation as a group. Although I am K-12, your description of what you experience within your schooling as a leader is exactly where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
I've moved to the middle school sector, coming from elementary into middle school. I'm at that school that you described. So one of the first questions I received from a lot of colleagues and a lot of even the students when they heard, oh, Dr. Robinson is coming here. Well, you're a doctor in what? A lot of our middle school students didn't even realize there were doctors outside of medical doctors. And
Mm-hmm.
their question was, well, why are you coming here? My response is the same, regardless as to whatever school I'm at. I'm coming here because I expect you to learn. I think you deserve the best education possible. So being able to understand where you are, understand the culture that you're entering, was one of the things that I had to embrace. And not only understanding that culture, but understanding how can we change the dynamics of what's happening here so that we're not labeled that failing school much
Mm-hmm.
longer. The best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a
Right at
time.
a time.
So going into the school with all of the deficiencies that are there, we have to, again, plan purposely, intentionally, and then create those plans with all of our staff in mind. Like you said, leaders can't make all of the decisions. So when there are issues that have to be brought to the table, although we have advisory boards where we do have a parent to sit on our advisory board, we're always taking those suggestions back to the staff to say, what do you think about this? How do you think we can move forward to do X, Y, and Z? um, Again, I'm very fortunate to be where I am, and I have high hopes for where we're going. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. But building relationships allow teachers to see, oh, she is on the team with us.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I do appreciate that as being my role and them embracing that. And I applaud you guys as leaders who do just that. Listen to your staff. I've had teachers in the past, and I've been a teacher leader for several years because I've been a reading specialist and now I'm an instructional specialist. But I've had teachers to come to me and say, I don't know if I can approach the principal, or I don't know if I can approach the administrative team can you make sure they know this is how I feel? So if you are that leader in that position, like Jim said, listen more than you talk, because your teachers and those that are working under you, they have things to say. They need to be able to say those things in order to thrust that organization forward. But if you don't understand or know what they're thinking, and if you are so intimidating that you're creating that fear where they don't want to come to you and they don't have a liaison to go to say, hey, can you tell the leader this? Then we're not going to move that organization forward. So building those relationships are critical, to make sure that we are moving forward and in the right direction. Last thing I say is leaders do need motivation as well. So I try to purpose within my heart to make sure I'm checking in on my principal and my assistant principal to be that right hand for them, as we're having those honest conversations, because they can feel beat down a lot. In fact, I'm on maternity leave. I know you guys know, but I had a conversation with my principal a couple of days ago. She's had 2 teachers who have put in resignation letters.
Wow.
So now we're going to have to go again back to that drawing board to say, how do we move forward from here? Because we have to have people in place to teach our kiddos. And again, I get it. It's overwhelming. But how do we move past that point of being overwhelmed to creating an environment where we all win? Because that's the ultimate goal. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it was it Aaron Burr who said to Hamilton, smile more, talk less. It might have been Lin-Manuel Miranda, but I think when I hear you talk about the sense of communication, listening, I think in terms of some high level topics, and things I've seen in the chat come through: trust, communication, listening. I know Nicole Bell wrote in the chat, leading with servant's heart, and authenticity. And so to bring some of this back to those as leaders, and I would love for you to add aspects to that, because Dr. Taylor provided such a wonderful look at the issue and the topics broadly. But you as leaders, what themes are a priority for you as leaders? How do you and how do you integrate those themes within your organizations? How have you? What does that look like on a more situational level?
So, Sean, I'd like to address that. One of the actions that we're taking as a governing board, and I've been a principal and a superintendent and all of those things, but from the perspective of a governing board now who needs to reiterate our commitment to our mission and values, we've had the perfect storm in a nightmare sense on one of our islands. And when we started planning a town hall meeting, at first it was very formal with a panel sitting in front and the audience, but knowing our culture and knowing that we had to diffuse this anger that the community is feeling, we've redesigned this meeting. We're all sitting in a circle. Nobody is higher than anybody else. We have talking points that we're going to address. And the first is, we know that you have lived through chaos, and we are absolutely here to listen to you. We will share anything except matters of personnel. So please ask questions. What can we do and what do we need to hear? So I'm really proud of the fact that 4 of our board members are traveling to sit in on this conversation. And I think that making an effort to converse and not discuss, because discussion to me has the same root word as percussion, where everybody's banging their ideas out, but not listening to one another. So here culturally, we have something called talk story. It's you sit down and you listen first, and then you share your thoughts. And so we're replicating that process because it's culturally relevant here.
Thank you, Dr. Schumacher. Anyone else? I wanted to bring in some, if you'll allow me, some questions coming from our audience as well. So let me just let me bring in a few, and then as you're thinking about some of the other topics that you want to mention as well. Someone asks, how can we approach change in a way that fosters relationships, even when change often sparks fear? And how do we project the positive nature of change for all involved while we are still building those relationships? Anyone want to take that one?
I hate to be talking all the time, but somebody asked it in the chat. And, one tool that I think that could be really helpful for school leaders, if you look at the research of Waters, Marzano, and McNulty from 2005, um, the study was a meta-analysis of leaders, specifically principals, behaviors that are directly associated with increased student achievement. And there are 21 responsibilities of school leaders. And in those 21 are things like relationships, culture, discipline, which refers to reducing the interruptions that we get during the day, not ringing the bells when teachers are teaching, those kinds of things. And understanding that each situation that we come up against as leaders requires us to use different responsibilities. If somebody is very fearful of a change that's coming, you certainly wouldn't start with bringing in new curriculum or instructional materials. You have to start with building relationships and addressing the culture of the school. So I'll put the reference in the chat, but it's really wonderful, very usable information.
And Jane, I'll just piggyback on that. Again, I think building relationships is probably key for a lot of things, because once you get in a team that realizes that you are actually a part of that team, then it's almost impossible for them to not do something for you. Again, as a teacher leader, one thing that, again, I'm just always very transparent, because I tell the teachers I work with, my first responsibility is realizing what it was like being a teacher in the classroom, not just this teacher outside of the classroom. So because I understood how I felt as a teacher in the classroom, I want to kind of understand where you are as that teacher before I even go in to try to do X, Y, and Z. Like, we're not doing anything on my agenda until I address yours first. And again, once you show them, because they have to see it. You can't just go and say, I'm a part of this team. Once they see that you have their back and you're on their team, there's nothing they won't do for you.
Thank you. Dr. Robinson, if we can stay with you for just a moment too, because I think there was something you alluded to there, and even something mentioned earlier, and then of course anyone chime in. But in thinking about how we help or assist folks with transitioning into change, with what may sort of seem chaos with school reforms. I know Dr. Bowen mentioned, sort of a chaos that happened or existed in what's it, a revise or a shift in what was the word? It just slipped.
It's a reorganization within.
Thank you. Yes, reorganization. What are the strategies or even management of critical aspects that we can help folks in these shifts, in these changes? What does that look like? How do we support? How do we assist at the organizational level?
Again, first of all, you're side by side with that person during this period of change. And I've seen my role as walking side by side with them. And I have to say, sometimes I do take on that place where I will do things for you just to model what that may look like, and then I'm going to walk side by side with you. So it's almost like I'm going to do it, then we're going to do it together, Now I want you to do it. Almost a gradual release of responsibility when it comes to them transitioning into that change role. But the entire time they have to see and realize, again, I don't have to do this by myself. I think Alentia said it when she mentioned her team stepping up to run the board meetings. I'm still going to be there. I'm just going to be in the background, where now, because I've built you as one of my team leaders or team members, you can move forward and step into that role that I need you to step into. So being present as they transition, and being there to kind of help dust them off. My role, once I release that responsibility where they are doing it, is just being their cheerleader at that point, letting them know that you are doing a good job, and then being there as that ear if I need to listen, or if I need to kind of bounce some ideas off of if they need to bounce some ideas off of my head during that time as well.
Thank you, Dr.
Just a quick comment on that too. One of the comments says, "What do I do when I see turnover around me at school?" Which goes along with, as far as how do you, working through some of the chaos. And one of the things that I had to learn is that sometimes people need to go. Many times people need to go. If you're in a situation where you're in a school that's under the spotlight, it's been labeled as failing, the pressure can be intense, and it goes along the comment about stress management. I would say it took about 3 years for me to get completely the right staff. When I walked in, I inherited a staff. And like I said, as things get more intentional and fine-tuned, some people realize, I don't want to work like this. I don't want to do all this planning and all these meetings and all this talking, and that's just not their thing, and that's fine. So then that means you would be better somewhere else. And just learning not to feel like I had failed as a leader if people left. Actually, in many cases, you're winning when they leave, because now, guess what? You get to select who comes in to replace them. And that's how, over a period of several years, we were able to build what I would, just call, not saying everyone was the super teacher of the year. That's not even really what you need. You need commitment and that loyalty, in that I'm rolling my sleeves up. I'm doing what's best for our campus as a whole. And we can teach you how to teach skills effectively. There's some things you can teach people how to do. Other things, if it's not in them, if they don't have that heart, it's hard to work around that, and it becomes a stumbling block. Another question was someone saying, what do people see as obstacles that you can have to overcome? And sometimes it can be just that stubborn person who knows they're in the wrong place. And it's like, I was here when you came, I'll be here when you leave, I'm not leaving. And just having to work and incorporate them to the point where they feel like, okay, the kids are excited, maybe I'll get in here and do some work today. But to not beat yourself up over someone left, and seeing it as an opportunity to build, to strengthen.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. And you bring up a great point. I remember when I was in Los Angeles, and I was asked by the union, the United Teachers Los Angeles, and by the local district to lead a team to write some proposals to get operation of schools. And one of the things I said, is that if I lead this team, one of the pieces that has to be in the proposal is that if a teacher doesn't want to be there, they can leave at any time. And they both agreed, and we did, when opening one of the schools, we did have some folks leave after first semester because that commitment, wasn't where they wanted to be. It really goes to the heart of one of the things that Sir Giovanni says in his Strengthening the Heartbeat. He talks about, there's not necessarily bad teachers or bad administrators. There's a mismatch. And I think Dr. Schumacher alluded to this a little about that executive director, the mismatch of where people should be or belong. And so it's that sense of belonging. And so if we can just shift a little bit to that idea that of this DEIB. There was some discussion. So what are, and I want to open this to everyone, what are the authentic methods of weaving DEIB into these themes, if we can talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and within the scope of the communities in which we all serve. Thoughts on that?
I just think, it has to come back to trust. And when I think of myself, I came to the school that I came to sort of as an outsider. I was a middle class guy. I don't share Joy's background at all. But shortly after, I think I'll get to the point here. Shortly after I became a principal, we had high poor. We had probably 70% free and reduced lunch, not 99, but 70 is pretty high. And we had this poor white kid who tragically died. Okay, just tragically died. And I went, and I had to go to those folks' house and sit on the porch and try to mourn with them about the death of their child. And I have 3 kids myself, and that's a stretch for me. I would rather stay in a room and read a book than go out and talk to people like that. And so that was a stretch. So I think let them know that you care. I had another guy who honestly was an alcohol. He had problems with alcoholism, drugs, and everything. And I went round and round with this guy, and it was the same kind of thing. Try to show that you care and establish that sense of community. And I thought the guy was a lost cause, and honestly, I was trying to get him to quit or fire him. And he called me one day, just called me on my cell phone. He says, you told me to call you, that you cared, and here I'm here to talk to you about this problem. And it was remarkable. Okay. And I had people come to me often with situations like that: Black, white, Hispanic, poor. And so for me, so somebody mentioned servant leadership, and then Sean mentioned Sir Giovanni, and it just like popped into my head. I think Sir Giovanni talked about the heart, hand, and head of leadership. Okay. And so I really tried, and I was working on my dissertation then. So that's why I read that. I thought, well, this applies, right? And so I think, if we can think of the heart and the servant leadership comes first, the hand of reaching out to people to give them, whatever they need, and then the head, which is, as Joy saw, you got to structure it up. Okay. I don't want to avoid the fact, though, that we are in what have we used? Tumultuous times or something. So, we've got, one of my favorite is Gross and Shapiro talk about leadership in turbulent times. And I don't know that they anticipated several years ago the turbulent times in which our schools find themselves. And so in the environment in which I live in Florida, it's a turbulent time. And and Shaquana and I have talked about this. How do you establish these conversations in potentially hostile environments? And what I think is we do it one person at a time and one conversation at a time. And I don't want to appear naive or Pollyanna-ish about that. But I think if we can adopt, the Greenleaf servant leadership, and then Giovanni's heart, hand, and head. But it's got to work one at a time. It's got to work one conversation at a time. I'm in an environment where the government is saying we're not going to have any of these trainings, right? Leadership. We're not going to have it. And we're not going to have it in schools. We're not going to have it in organizations, and that's tough. So you got to have those conversations one person at a time, and often with people maybe you don't want to have that conversation with, uncomfortable. So
Thank you.
I feel the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. Dr. Boeing, I want to make sure we can get that scope from higher education too, since you are in that field is now, and what that looks like.
I was listening to everything, and really the only thing that's the primary difference is the age group that you are educating. Some of the challenges that you face at the K through 12 is what we face in the higher ed community. And this thing called tenure sometimes make it challenging. to move individuals who wouldn't necessarily move on their own. Um, I was just at a conference and we were talking about, what about when the school's making the major shift and because they're tenured, they won't make the shift. Um, so I don't work in that type of environment, of a tenured environment, but I do know that there are just good fits, and there's times when you do have to ask individuals, is it time for you to make a decision that's more meaningful to you? And I think as a leader, it's hard because there's so many laws and there's so many regulations that keep us from asking directly a question. But I think if you have a relationship and you're having honest conversations along the journey, then I think it's gonna evolve on its own when we talk about individuals who need to transition. I know I'm working on something for my leadership team. Right now, it's going to develop the emotions and look at the emotions and look at their roles as leaders and make certain that they still feel like they're connected to the work. Because there's so much rapid fire change. I'm looking at some of the questions in there. There's so much rapid fire change that it can be fatiguing, and yet it's where we are right now in education, whether it's K through 12 or higher ed. I often look at the woes of, as Shaquana calls them, kiddos, the kiddos that are graduating, and I love that term. The kiddos that are graduating will eventually potentially matriculate through higher education. And the challenge is there's such a gap in what they've learned with the expectation in the higher education. And how do we make certain that those who want to get a degree can still get a degree, but not at the expense of compromising the degree? It's a real serious issue that we're looking at. And then also the portability of education. I've been thinking just these little bullet thoughts are coming. The portability of education. Right now, we most students don't want to take a class for the traditional length of time, nor they want the traditional setting. Let me say, many want that. They want to get away from home. That's so they can do that by going to a college campus. Um, but they don't want to receive education in the traditional format. And so we are really looking at how does this work today. And I've been my provost, his entire leadership team, academic leadership team, we've been reading this book called The Great Upheaval, and it's been academically sound, and it's also based on a lot of research. And I know one of the authors comes to mind. His last name is Levine, but it's a great book. It's a good book to read with the ink pen, and it doesn't matter if you're in K through 12 or higher ed. So just theoretically, it goes back to the culture of trust that we create. And I would also add a couple other words: being courageous, meaning having the conversations you need to have, doing the things you need to do, and being authentic. And I think as leaders, we get fatigued when we're not authentic. So if we remain authentic, even though it's a painful discussion, we can kind of recharge a little better and go back into doing what we need to do.
I think that goes back to both Jim and Joy, what they mentioned about being honest. Like, these conversations, we have to have them in order for us to see and make those changes. So thinking about the DEI, you want to think about where you are and
Mhm.
then teach to that. We have to understand, all right, what do I need to learn, or what can I learn from this environment, this culture, this situation, and then start acting on that. And I would say for us, part of our acting on addressing the DEI within our school environment
Mhm.
is to make sure that our teachers are properly trained. Because
Mhm.
with COVID coming in, a lot of teachers don't know how to respond in those situations. And I know this summer we have put into place teachers going through culturally responsive training so that they are better equipped. We have to be able to provide that type of support to those
Mhm.
teachers to make them feel successful, to empower them to be able to do the work. Because, and Joy, I was reflecting on what you said about our schools of teachers who might need to leave. If you don't have that heart to be
Mhm.
there. We
Mhm.
provided you all of the training, all of the support, all of the resources. Now we're holding you accountable to that. If you can't meet those expectations, then it may be time for you to transition to somewhere that's a better fit for you as a teacher.
You know, Sean, I'd like to also say that I think for us to be effective leaders in turbulent times, we have to be very aware of our own um, biases and assumptions, and we have to do the work around DEIB because it starts inside each of us. We can't expect our, whether it's fellow board members or staff, to listen to us about how we have to teach all children unless we've done the work inside ourselves. And we talk about our journey of learning and unlearning what our society teaches us about systemic racism that we may not even be aware of. So I think, I mentioned in Tim's session that he's one of the first authors I read when I began my own journey of understanding my assumptions. And it was painful, very painful. But as a white Jewish woman, it is my responsibility to share with others what my own journey looked like, because we have to start inside before we start training or bringing in this kind of work into our learning communities. We have to model our own journey through it to be genuine and not disingenuous.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm going to jump right in real quick. And I would have to say this, Jane, has been a conversation that we've had as a team, Jim, Alencia, myself, where we have to be sure to address our own biases in all situations. Because if you're going in with the bias that you haven't addressed within yourself, then is there perhaps an opportunity or a way that you will kind of let that overflow onto the situation, which is not necessarily what we want. Second thing I was looking in the chat that I do want to address is the fact that one of the things Joy mentioned was overwhelming. Again, we have to realize we're not coming out of, but we're still in a space of COVID-19. So not only do we look at the needs of the students, but we also have to look at the needs of the adults that we're working with and understand how much stress that they are under. There are things that you will have to put in place to address those social emotional components for your staff, because if they're not well mentally, physically, spiritually, socially, then it's going to show in the instruction that they try to put in place for their students. Again, I was at a school, the elementary school I was at. One of the ways that I introduced just a little stress reliever or stress management technique for our teachers is to have a yoga teacher come in one day a week. Again, it didn't cost much. It didn't take a whole lot of time, but those teachers who participated in it, they had the opportunity for that space to be provided for them and have that stress management in place if they needed that.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Dr. Lane,
I just
no, please.
So many thoughts. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Schumacher again for mentioning Nell Noddings, who is perhaps the first researcher to talk about care and the fact that care is such a significant issue in ethic and education. Just real quick, some quick again. Peter had talked about to ask significant phrase. Tim had talked about backlash from white hegemony, which I think I have to be aware of. Jane has to be aware of, right? And then Tim had mentioned James Baldwin, the welcome table of white sovereignty. Well, the privilege of ignorance. I mean, these are significant things that we have to embrace, and it happens one incident at a time. And I'll just try to give you some very quick examples. When I was working on my dissertation, I was talking about we had a poor school, and I made a comment to my chair that I was going to write. In fact, I did write that poverty was the single most significant factor, or something like that. And he said, no, it's not. He says race is. And I said, no, poverty. And he said, no. He says, you will never know what it is to walk into a room and think that you don't belong there, that you're not smart enough to be there. He says, you, because you're a white male, that will never be a hurdle that you have to. Now, as soon as you open your mouth, maybe people will change their mind, but that won't be the first thing that you have to deal with. Okay, another thing, when we celebrated success at our school, okay, we had a party for the teachers and for kids, and the party was put on by a family that owned a house on a lake nearby, and one of the teachers, a couple of teachers had ski boats, and we were skiing, we were cooking out and everything. And I had an assistant principal who was African American, and he sat there and he looked at this and he says, "So this is what white folks do to have fun." And it was just, it was kind of an off the cuff thing, but he was from the projects and he had not been, and I didn't think about it. I mean, before I thought, okay, they got this house and, got a ski boat and we're doing it, but this guy said, this is what white folks do to have fun. And I hadn't thought about that before. And it was just like a slap on the face to me. And then the final thing, Jane is from Hawaii. So my son had an opportunity to go to Hawaii when he was in college. And, it's white male privilege. I don't know, the school had an opportunity for it. And he thought he was going to Hawaii for a vacation. And he ended up working. It was a youth group. He ended up working with homeless people in Hawaii. And for the first time, he had an insight into that element, and in conversations with people who lived on the street, which is something he hadn't seen before. Okay, so those were just some very poignant examples, of he had a roommate who had been in a car wreck and he was paralyzed from the neck down. You don't understand those scenarios until you face them firsthand. And I think it's incumbent upon us to try to put ourselves in those situations where we do understand, where we change our experience one piece at a time. And I think it's incumbent upon leaders to do that, even in turbulent times, especially in turbulent times.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. Speaking of turbulent times, there are a few questions, and I know we're sort of down to the wire. I believe we've got 10 minutes, roughly, or 11. Turbulent times. Someone asked a question, and I don't think we sort of addressed it. In high turnover situations, it's important to understand why. Thoughts on that turbulent, and we're sort of seeing across the country a shortage. I know of teachers, of school educators. What's happened, and how do we help fix this national tumultuous crisis?
Can I kind of hit this kind of high level for everyone? There's this little thing taking place called the Great Resignation. And I think that oftentimes there were some areas that we always felt immune to things that happen in society. And I just believe we're seeing it in higher education in K through 12. People are resigning because of whatever reason. And unfortunately, we're not able to produce it. We saw this in healthcare. I give you that example with the shortage of primary care physicians as well as nurses. Nurses is a cyclical thing. We just have to plan for the great resignation, not being a one-off situation, but something that we're going to deal with for a little while. Like we said a little bit, some resignations are very welcomed and encouraged. And I think that we just have to, in higher education, plan, and K through 12 plan for the resignation and develop a strategy for always filling those positions and creating the opportunity for I'm going to use the Six Sigma language, create better throughput. So when they're graduating from college, that we actually create the opportunity to them come through to the school setting.
Thank you, Dr. Bowen. And I think, who was it? Jim Cramer said, I think it's the great liberation over resignation, which is interesting. Other thoughts on that?
Just thinking about what Shaquana said earlier about the need to meet the needs of the adults in the building. I have a couple of family members who were teachers, and when the pandemic hit, we were on spring break. And all of a sudden they had to pivot from, while you're on spring break, you need to plan for when you come back in a week that you're going to be teaching from home on a computer, even though you've never done it. Okay, it's like best wishes. They had a couple of days training and people were just in shock. So, that first 9 weeks, you just powered through it. But then they came back in the fall and here we go again. And it still was very difficult. Finally, they're back in the building and it's like, we have to address this. That everyone's almost like PTSD in a way that you've gone through, not just as a family member, you may have lost a family, all kinds of things are going on in people's lives, and that you have to address it. And I think with the huge turnover with teachers, especially, has been another term I heard this week, the great reckoning of thinking about, is this really worth it? And teachers are being recruited into other fields. It's like, why not? You've got this well-educated person, they're articulate, they write well, they can actually do other things besides going into a classroom where I'm having to buy my own supplies, I'm having to do all these different things. And that we just have to really look at that people do seem to they come back with more options and kind of a different mindset of, no, I really don't just have to do this anymore. Even though they love children, they realize there's other ways that I can serve children and help meet their needs. And so I think we can't come back to business as usual. You have to come back with the understanding of, I've got to look out for my kids. I got to look out for the grown-ups too, because they can't be authentic and real. Children see right through that. If you're just up there faking it and trying to get to, the 3 o'clock, they know and it shows. And so, looking at the needs of how you manage the stress and all the different demands that are being placed on them. Here we had teachers doing what's called the hybrid model, where you're teaching live in front of a class while also Zooming online. That's not what they signed up for. So you could tough it out for a while, but long term, that's not something that teachers are really wanting to do, and being willing to say, okay, we've got to come up with a better plan and talking to them about what's a different way that we can do this.
And I would add to that as well. Teachers had to make that pivot and that transition with no extra money. So I'm doing 2 jobs, and this is what I heard from the teachers. I'm doing 2 jobs, but I'm still getting 1 pay. Or you're not even acknowledging the fact that I'm doing 2 jobs by saying, hey, here's a bonus, or let me buy lunch this week. So teachers have been very voiceful about that transition of moving from hybrid or classroom to hybrid and dealing with teaching in COVID. It's not business as usual anymore. And I think as leaders, we have to realize, because it's not business as usual, we need a plan. And we need a plan that's going to be solid enough to meet the needs of those teachers if we're in that situation again.
Right.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. So I know we've got 5 minutes. I want to see if there are any last minute burning thoughts. And I know, thank you to all who have attended and for your questions. I know we didn't get to all of them. There were still some lingering. But to our panelists, any sort of burning last minute takeaways for our audience?
I would just leave a thought with the first letter in intentional leadership that we started with this discussion is I. So as a leader, how do I show up? As a leader, how do I invest? As a leader, how do I live what I ask my colleagues or those that I lead to live? It's easy to say, take your vacation time, and you've never taken your time. It tells them that you don't value what you say and what you say you don't mean. So so I would say pay attention to the first leader of intent, the first letter of intentional, which is I. So how are you showing up as that leader that you're wanting others to show up as well?
I think that's an excellent point. For the past 2 years, all of us in leadership have been suffering the same as all of our students and our colleagues. And so my strategy is just power through it, just suck it up, buttercup, and just keep going. And because I haven't acknowledged my own stress with the situation and all of the changes that it's brought, I fell on Friday. I have a major concussion and I have 13 lovely stitches up here. And somebody asked me yesterday, what caused you to fall? And when I looked back, it's all this stress that's been bottled up inside of me. And as leaders, we have to make time for ourselves first before we can lead anybody else. And I'm blessed to have a supervisor who says to me, "You're taking the week off. That's it. I mean, that's it. Or I'll call your husband," which is always a good threat. But it's really helped because we're suffering as much as the people we serve have suffered. And I think we have to acknowledge that living in chaos is not easy for any of us. And we have to take care of ourselves first.
Right.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I want to say thank you so much to our audience, and especially to Dr. Taylor and Dr. Schumacher and Dr. Robinson, Dr. Bowen, Dr. Lane. Sort of started by saying whatever that joke began: a dean, a superintendent, a principal, a teacher, an instructional coach all walk into a room, and they are met by poverty, they're met by race, they're met by a pandemic, they're met by tumultuous events. And they say, "I am here to give you my all, and to give it my all, and to help you be better citizens on the way out." And so thank you for all you do, and to all of our folks for all you do, audience listening. And thank you for joining us today. And so thank you, and enjoy the rest of the summit.
And I think Saray wanted to make an announcement. Is she there?
I think she put, okay, I think she's coming on. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I actually wanted to invite all of you. Thank you for such a wonderful session. The chat was so engaging and just engaged on the thoughts and the insight that you all provided. Thank you. And I would like to invite all of you, the attendees, and all of you to, during this next lunch break for some of you, or afternoon break, if you want to hover over the networking section on the left side in the navigation panel and just connect with one another. Use this time to engage, explore the different employer booths, and we will see you at 1 o'clock Pacific time or 4 p.m. Eastern time to discuss what the research component, the research section on telling us about our changing world and the implications for a fast evolving workplace. So thank you, all of you. Thank you again to this wonderful panel of speakers, and we'll see you in a little bit at the next section. Thank you.
Thank you, Saray.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fun.